Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you today. We got Travis rejoining us, which it has been way too long since you've been on the show, brother. And we got Ben joining us. He's a little late. He'll be joining us in a little bit, but I am stoked to get this started. And while I am stoked, y'all should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails when we go live, which is, of course, Fridays for The Collective and Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We can hit those throughout the show. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. Again, that comes out every Sunday, Monday-ish, wherever we get that in time. Sean figures it out quickly and I can get it out right away. And that way you can stay in the loop with some added information on each show. Other than that, we're good to go. Travis, you want to give us a quick little rundown, 10 to 15 seconds, and then we can carry on with combo.
Travis Denman, retired Army guy. I spent 22 years in Ranger Battalion and Special Forces in the U.S. Army. I retired in 2014, did a bit of contracting overseas, and then hung that up and started to use my GI Bill benefits. And for the last year and a couple months, I've been in aviation program in the Northwest of the United States, and still doing that right now.
Rolling around on in your RV, right? Just living life out on the fringes.
Yeah. Yeah, we did that for a couple of years, just going here and there, seeing the United States, and that was awesome. And then being retired is kind of not my style, so I had to get back in the workforce at some point and do something. Do something.
Yeah, exactly. Got to do something. Yeah. Sean, how's life out in the mountains?
Yeah, things are good. They're even better now that Travis is back on the podcast. It feels like it's been freaking forever. But it's so good to see you because genuinely, this is true words. You're one of the most grounded dudes I've met on the podcast. And for whatever reason, I think that. I just think it. And it's probably your vibe, or it's just the way you kind of hold your space, or how you choose your words. And there's a lot of things that go into that complex sort of subject of grounded. But you've always struck me as one of the most grounded guys that I've bumped into on the podcast. So I don't know, maybe we'll see why that is as we unfold things today on the podcast.
Indeed.
Well, let's get into it. I want to know, first off, for those that are like, what is being grounded? What does that even mean? Where does that even come from? Let's start right at the beginning. What do you feel being grounded truly is, Trav?
I think that being grounded really means to just focus on where you are currently and what you can affect at this given time. I think a lot of us in this information age, we get really, really, really caught up in the big picture everywhere, like, oh my God, climate change and the world's going to end. And there's some kind of apocalypse all the time. And we're all trying to fix everybody's problems. But, we didn't make our bed today, if you can't make your own bed, are you really going to solve the world's problems? Probably not, So start right there in your own bedroom, in your own house, in your own neighborhood, in your own city, and try to affect what you can and focus on that. And if everybody did that, things would be solved.
Yeah, it'd make things a lot easier, that's for sure. Sean, how about yourself? What do you think? Grounded?
Yeah, I gave it some thought this morning, and in simplistic terms, I think what we have to do is establish the difference between two similar phrases that sound very almost like the same thing, and they're actually used interchangeably depending on the circumstances or the audience or whatever the case is. And that is, are you centered and are you grounded? And so they're kind of the same, but they're not, in my opinion. And I think I need to tease out the details on that so that we can kind of move forward in a more granular way on sort of groundedness. So being centered or getting into your center or that term be centered means, generally speaking, your internal world. Get some sense of what's going on inside of you, your emotional state, why you feel the way you feel. Are you stable inside? Whereas staying grounded generally speaking, is going back in deep history to Stoicism and Taoism and certain aspects of ancient sort of philosophy on how to do staying grounded well. That was established thousands of years ago. And generally it means just where are your feet right now? How stable is your foundation in the reality that you're standing in right now? So in essence, I'd just like to throw this out. I think being centered is one state of reality, and that's your inner world. And then being grounded is another state of reality, and that is the external world. And to ground yourself in the moment and also be centered in that moment, that's the magic sauce, I believe. So, as Travis said, we can make it super simple to be grounded. Freaking make your bed, bro. I mean, start there. However, while you're making your bed, are you centered? Because you can be a lunatic as you're making your bed. You can be like totally off your rocker, so emotional that you're yelling at your bed as you're making it. And so you're grounded in the reality of making a bed, but you're not centered as you're trying to be grounded. I hope that makes sense.
I think it makes sense, and I like the concept too, because when I feel grounded, I feel at not so much just at peace, but I feel right with whatever it is I'm doing. So if I'm making my bed in a grounded manner, I feel like making my bed is the right thing to do in that moment. Or whether I am when I start to get externalized, when I start to get ungrounded, for lack of a better term, or flighty perhaps, I'm concentrating a lot on the external world. I'm concentrating on the car in front of me, or the fact that the new cat ripped up my new thing, or whatever it is. I'm no longer in myself. I no longer feel right with what it is I'm doing. But when I am grounded, whatever it is I'm doing feels like the right thing to do, if that makes sense. Trav, you got any thoughts on that?
There's a lot of fulfillment from being centered also, and being grounded, and you focus on the things that you can affect, and then you accomplish something. That there's a sense of accomplishment that helps you through the day and helps you into tomorrow, because there's actually progress being made, and you can see that progress and you get fulfillment out of it. Whereas if you're focused on some mythical apocalyptic event that's outside of your control, you can worry and worry and worry, and protest and debate and all those things, and it seems like there never is any change to the situation, and all that does is frustrate you. So remaining where you can actually have some kind of effect, not only is it good for your own self-esteem, but you also make progress to the positive.
There's interestingly enough, I'm listening to a podcast right now on the rise and fall of the Mongol Empire, and one of the things that happens quite a bit in this storyline is the fact that there's an existential threat. Like Western Europe has this existential threat known as the Tartars, and they don't really know who they are, and they don't know why it's there, but it starts to rile people up, and people start to get in, they start to engage with each other, they start to infight, they start to create this ball of anger, and completely uncentered in reality of what's actually happening in front of them. Now, the the Mongols were an actual threat, but if you're in, Paris, and the Mongols are still in Eastern Europe, well, they're not really an existential threat tomorrow or right now. So I wonder if that has something to do with it. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah. So I think what you've described to me, I would categorize as the grounded moment, or the reality, the external reality is what grounded is. The external reality is the Mongols are heading your way, and you don't know when they're going to arrive, but they're going to head your way. That's the prevailing attitude. So then on the internal world, or the centered world, that's where you're being impacted. Externally, you can't feel any horse hooves kind of thundering across the steps and heading your direction, half a click away. You can't feel any of that. But you can feel the social pressure, the underlying buzz, the underlying vibe, the energy of the culture in Paris. That's all a Twitter as they eat their eclairs and consider, when are those horses arriving? And so the inner world is what's distorting the external reality. And that inner world is being created by the individual with the eclair accepting the social fabric, the invisible message that everyone is kind of passing along to each other of anxiety or of panic or of, this is out of my control. Those horses are coming my way. I don't know when, I don't know why, and I don't know what they're going to do, but it's coming my way. And like, there's no need to panic, of course. However, socially, or the social fabric is panicking, and humans pick up on that. I mean, we know how to hunt, and we know when we're being hunted. And so I think there's a lot of stuff to talk about in there, but I'll sum it up at this point.
I like it. Travis, you got any thoughts?
I also think that's kind of like that focus on the bigger picture is kind of a defense mechanism, so people can use that to divert attention away from what they're not doing. Generally, I kind of have my own thoughts on the professional protester, right? The person who's out there protesting like the apocalypse is coming, the end is near, and blah, blah, blah. What are we going to do? Like, well, I mean, do something, dig a foxhole, man. Like, do something productive besides carrying your sign around and yelling at everybody. If somebody told me the Mongolian horde was coming tomorrow, I'd start making some defenses, dude. I'd build a berm. We can start making some fallback positions. And if they come, I mean, I know at least what's going to happen when we engage with each other. And if they don't come, I mean, I got a cool little berm complex here set up around the house. You know what I mean? But I'm not going to just freak out and wait for somebody else to have an effect on my interaction with this apocalypse that's about to happen. I stay centered, man. Like, try to eat good, take care of your body, go to the gym, like all those little things, you're taking care of what you can affect,
I love that. And sorry, the screen was all over the place here. I want to jump Ben into the conversation, right into the fire. We're talking about the Mongols invading, staying grounded. So, Ben, why don't you just you jump in here, and we'll get your thoughts. Basically, what we're talking about is that there's an existential threat to the world, right? And whether or not that internal monologue of staying grounded versus the external existential threats. What do you got? Jump right in.
Oh man, we're getting into it right away, huh? I think just to think about that for a moment, I believe there's a big shift taking place right now from a human perspective, culturally, where there's something being asked of us all to step up more collectively as a community of people, and start focusing more on the humanity aspects of existence versus this material existence. I think the pressures of society, at least for folks in general, are becoming very, very real, and it's creating a certain type of experience that's forcing us all to make different choices. And I think we're really, really in the thick of it right now, if I'm being honest.
I couldn't agree more. I think we're seeing it more and more often, especially with the level of communication that we have available to us through, social media and podcasting, and just the technology we have now. I think I'm wondering how much that has to play. Sean, you were talking about the underlying current, the anxiety within a larger group of people. I wonder how much the social media aspect of it and the connectedness of the world, connectivity of the world, is kind of adding to that little bit of vibe underground. What do you think, Sean?
Well, first of all, good job, Ben. Freaking taking one on the chin to some degree from chance. And it wasn't just a jab, by the way, it was a right cross. And you managed it like a champ. And so, what a perfect example, or what a case study for how a person can be grounded in the moment and manage that moment well, in my opinion. And so, what was the recipe to success? Ben listened carefully, and then he paused 2-3, and he didn't knee-jerk reaction out his quick snappy answer to kind of get the green light. He took a moment, and a moment that maybe felt a bit long to him, but it felt right to me. And so, like, he delivered his thoughts thoughtfully, structured well, stable, and not unemotional, but not overly emotional. Like, I think he nailed it. And so that idea of being grounded in all aspects of your life, how you communicate, how you hold your space, how you hang out with people, how you dream the big dreams with other dreamers, all of these things have to be, to some degree, sort of stable. Like, grounded is generally referred to as stable. And so think about, maybe let's design a spectrum of groundedness right now. Super quickly, I'll build one out. You've got someone who is completely delusional, irrational, and is barely clinging to the fabric of reality, their external reality. They think everyone's a demon and everyone's gonna hunt them down and eat them. So that's a bizarre reality, not grounded in all the other human experiences around them. So you've got like crazy. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got so grounded, or so we'll call it dogmatic, that you are extremely reluctant to accept new ideas. And anything that feels like it is out of your scope of perspective, it's either illogical or it doesn't meet your set of facts. So you've got crazy and you've got extremely dogmatic. Well, somewhere in between there, we'll call it a sliding scale of groundedness. There's a couple of other examples. And so I would use all of us as an example on the spectrum here of, we're all grounded enough to do the things that we do in our lives. However, we all have to be a little ungrounded, and I'm going to call that, in quotes, imaginative, that you get other things done in your life that are notable. And so, using Travis as the example, he just recently started his pilot certification. Like, if he was like super duper grounded and dogmatic, he would literally never get off the ground. But by using some curiosity and imagination and dreaming a bigger dream, per se, then here he is flying around in the skies, looking down at us mere mortals. So I think that groundedness is a spectrum, and I don't think you should ever lock into place in your life. I think that you should be moving across that spectrum throughout the day, where you're daydreaming to some degree. I stared out my window this morning and did a little bit of daydreaming, but didn't lose my touch with reality. And so I think you've got to like explore groundedness enough to understand its power, not just one power, but the many powers it can offer. That's my best effort at that anyway. See what you guys think.
It. Travis, what do you got?
Progress comes from change, you know? So it's like Sean said, if you're so dogmatic that you can't move, like that you're so locked into this, this is the way it is type of thinking, then what else? Like, what else is there? What's the point after that? If this is just the way it is and that's the way it's going to be, I mean, what then? Everything we do, you have to be bold enough to accept new ideas and brave enough to freaking give things a try that you're not familiar with, and learning new things. I think probably, a lot of my Army career I spent as an instructor in various capacities. Even when I was in a line unit, you're still teaching new guys and you're still learning from old guys. And there's a culture of learning and teaching pretty much your whole career, and it, I think, opens you up to being humble enough to learn from people, and not being so locked in. I think, going into college, like later in life, I was 50 years old when I started college. So it's, a lot of people at that age have a hard time learning from, most of my professors. I'm older than them, and I think it takes a little bit of, got to eat some humble pie to listen to these people that are younger than you and actually learn from them. And it's impressive. I mean, a lot of them are impressive. Some of them are maybe a little naive, but they've got a lot of schooling, but not a lot of actual wisdom gained through experience, but a lot of book study. Most of us with military backgrounds did a fair amount of traveling, and kind of the college scene is not that way. There's not so much travel experience in the younger set, but that's just because they're young. So try to trade those experiences and exchange your wisdom for a little bit of their knowledge, vice versa, and everybody progresses together. And kind of staying grounded and centered and focused on what you have in common, really helps you like each other and learn from each other. And it also helps you discuss what you disagree about,
That's a good way to look at it. Ben, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, man. For me, so I love the topic of being grounded. I don't want to buck that philosophy, but I want to offer another perspective. I have started to utilize the word rooted instead of being grounded lately. And the reason why is, as Sean was talking about, kind of having this balance of being stable and sturdy, but also enough courage to move about, and follow curiosity. When I think of being rooted, I think of a big tree. It starts as a seed, as an idea. It starts to grow roots, tapping down into the ground, following the nutrients that it needs to grow. And above the ground, it's following its curiosity towards the light. And as it grows, it develops a very big, sturdy base, a trunk with deep roots that are continuing to grab knowledge, grab information, grab nutrients, and push it out into the limbs, into the leaves, that allow it to keep expanding into its curiosity, into the light as it continues to grow. And the process of that bears fruit. So every aspect of this rootedness, as you continue to follow your curiosity, as you continue to grow your roots deep, as above, so below, you keep fostering and bearing fruit that continue to breed new ideas, that continue to inspire people, that continue to create endlessly. And so the idea for me is it more stands in a place of being rooted, and you're in the flow of life, existing in pure being as the wind takes you about, and things exist with you and in you and around you. And things land on your limbs, and you provide shade and all types of things. You're existing in a space of existence with everything else.
I love this. I actually wrote down a little bit ago, like the life cycle, and then I wrote down mountains don't travel. To Sean's point of the sliding scale of groundedness, right? If you have a full extent, if you are fully grounded, you are similar to a mountain. You're not going anywhere. Over time, you'll slowly erode and things like that, but the mountains don't move. They don't travel. But trees and forests and things like that do travel with time, right? They slowly spread out, et cetera, et cetera. But when you look at the farthest extent of what you're talking about, like a leaf at the end of that tree trunk, it's chaotic. They're all over the place. There's no real thing to attach it. They're all going by the seat of its pants through the wind. I think it's a really great point in that when you first begin, that you require travel to then set roots, to then grow, to then spread those ideas, to then eventually create another leaf, which then creates fruit, which then creates more seeds, et cetera, down the road. Sean, what do you think?
So when I was trying to discover the etymology of being grounded or stay grounded. And there is no real true etymology. It's kind of a phrase that started being passed around in the self-help 1970s movement. And then, it got picked up, and now it's used in corporate board meetings, and it's used in whatever. It's used everywhere. And it's misused mostly. But the idea being that it never used to be a thing. And it's fairly recent as a term. But again, as I stated earlier, that this idea goes back thousands and thousands of years. And so as I was thinking about the etymology, I just simply tried to kind of connect it to my own personal journey, and that is my roots are Celtic, and so I thought, let's look at it through that lens. Let's look at the Celtic understanding, the ancient Celtic understanding of this idea, and of course, it tied directly to tree roots. And no offense, Ben, but that didn't work for me because I thought because I misattributed the idea. I didn't get the idea right until you've just passed on your version of it, which works much better for my mind. So when it wasn't working for me, I thought nah, I don't like this idea. Rooted, I get it, but now I'm not mobile. And so what's the point? Now I'm this big old tree that's doing its thing, but I'm not really helping the world around me per se, because I really hadn't thought of your angle, Ben. So here's what I had to do. My next logical leap was, oh, but what about Treebeard? What about, Lord of the Rings, when the trees all kind of step up and say, we're going to take our time, but let's go put some wisdom out into the world. And so that kind of worked for me, that groundedness, that rootedness, of that understanding of the interconnection between our external world and ourselves. But then along the way, you got to pass out that wisdom. So then now you're Treebeard, kind of slowly stomping your way through the forest. That's the only way it worked for me. But I hadn't considered that greater idea of a much larger interconnectedness with the tree and its ecosphere. So I dig it. Thank you.
Yeah. Trav, you got any thoughts?
I think a lot of this, when we start talking about movement, it's a matter of perspective. For us as human beings, we can walk across the ground and now we're moving, right? We can see within the time span that we've gone from somewhere to somewhere else. But everything is moving at some level. If you break any matter down to its smallest point, all the electrons are moving around. So there's movement in everything. Even if you might be rooted as a tree, there's still some movement there. Maybe not running a race or anything like that from here to there, but there's still movement happening. And there's change that happens. Even Chance saying the mountains don't move. Well, that's not exactly true either, because they're constantly moving. The earth is shifting, the ground's moving all the time. And out of that change is where we kind of where everything is born. Everything comes from change. You change your perspective on things, you have a new idea, and the world is just in a constant state of motion. And looking at what's in front of you and recognizing that and seeing what you can contribute and what you can benefit from is all just kind of part of life, man. And trying to stay positive and affect what you can for the better, and try to let the negative stuff go away, and not get so stuck in focusing on those negative things. I really think that a lot of what we have now with our media and the giant, problems that are seemingly impossible to fix, those are just used to hold people's attention, because, I keep coming back to, do what you can, do your job, do what you can, and stop telling me or stop telling other people what they need to do, and you do what you can instead. And I think we'd be a lot better off if everybody kind of just followed that mantra.
I have this image in my head of someone yelling from the shore, telling a surfer how to do things.
Yeah.
You need to with the thing, right? But this I want to ask you guys, with this constant movement, it really brought to mind surfing, or being able to float on things, or the consistency of motion while still being well balanced. But how do we do that in rough seas? How do we maintain a level of groundedness, a level of floating, while still under all of these things going on?
I mean,
what do you got?
You make mistakes and then you correct. You're never going to do things perfectly. You do your best, you make mistakes, you readjust, you kind of reevaluate, reattack, and it's a constant state of assessment, reassessment, execution, evaluation, planning, and then another execution. It's just like doing a mission at work, in the Army or whatever. You have a plan. That plan goes awesome right until the first shot rings out, and then it's no good anymore. And then all the guys on the ground are making fragos and making plans right then and reassessing the situation and responding to what's happening around them at that given time and doing the best that they can and, coming out successful. That's what life is all about, man.
Yeah, 100%. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll bring it back to the tree just for a moment, and then I'm going to relate this to like how it's useful for humans. The question starts to become, if an apple falls from a tree, is that apple no longer a tree, even though it's not connected to it anymore? And so the question of like, where does the tree start and where does the tree end starts to sort of take shape. And I think a lot of us, as let's say that tree starts to bear fruit, it can become nutrients for all types of different critters and creatures. And sometimes that fruit rots and it falls to the ground. And just like an idea or an emotion or an experience a human has, we have the same option as the tree. We can either think of that rotten fruit as poison or use it as nutrients for the next fruit that comes into our root system and bears another fruit. So I think a lot of this is just supporting and understanding, like Travis is saying is, the Buddha said the only thing that's permanent is impermanence. All things change, even down to that molecular level. All things are in a state of vibration. And then it comes to the question, to me, that's really the thing I contemplate maybe more than anything else is, where does Ben start and where does Ben end? If I'm in connection with anything and all my emotions and all of my experiences have this flowing capability through all of my experience with other people, with life, how I touch this table, how I touch my face, the awareness of everything that's happening, where does Ben start and where does Ben end? Or are we just all just connected? And I think that idea of this connectedness lets us relate to everything that we exist with, including humans. It brings empathy, it brings compassion, and more importantly, it replaces fear with love.
I am digging this. Let's just, we'll end on that note. That's the answer. Sean, what are you thinking? You got to unmute yourself, though.
So where does Ben start and where does Ben end is an interesting question. I love these kind of questions. I think them myself all the time. But I guess for today's podcast, the better question would be, where is Ben now? You know what I'm saying? Because that's the grounded aspect. That's the topic at hand. And so where is Ben now? Well, he's obviously grounded enough that he can relay that idea in a way that was stable and not intriguing, but appealing to consider, to listen to. If Ben would have come in all kind of crazy with this idea, there'd be people walking out of the room, of course, because like, that dude's crazy and I can't be around that. But that isn't the case. And so where is Ben now? He's grounded now and now. And now. And so what is now? Well, it's somewhere between where did Ben start and where does Ben end? And then that topic is, that's a universal timeline conversation that is relevant to this topic, but it would be an entire podcast folded into the podcast. And so where's Ben now? Well, he's probably somewhere on the spectrum. And I'm going to read this, not a new spectrum. And I called it the grounding spectrum. As I tried to relay earlier, there's kind of everywhere between crazy and super grounded. And so I'm just going to give just a couple of overviews here in my notes. So developing the spectrum concept, grounding. You can be over-grounded, which means excessively rigid, unable to adapt, too focused on concrete reality to the point of missing any possibilities. As an example, an accountant who can't brainstorm. Let's go to optimally grounded on the spectrum. Optimally grounded might look like you're connected to reality while maintaining flexibility. And as an example, this might be an entrepreneur who takes calculated risks. Let's move further down the spectrum to partially grounded. And this is where I would not slide Ben in, because I'm not trying to categorize him. I'm just throwing out categories. But Ben might be somewhere hanging out in this area. Partially grounded, meaning you're maintaining some connection while exploring possibilities. And as an example, that might be an artist in a flow state, which I believe Ben is. You know, he's in a flow state. From my perspective, he's naturally unfolding his thoughts in the moment. And I dig that. I try to do it myself, not maybe as successfully. So let's move down the spectrum a bit more. Minimally grounded. And this is primarily disconnected, but with a tether to reality. And that's like the wild daydreamer who's all out there daydreaming, but actually not getting anything done. And that's a loose term. And now we'll go finally to the other end of the spectrum, the extreme side, which is ungrounded. That means completely disconnected from reality. And, you know, that could be psychosis or what have you. And so somewhere on the spectrum, we all exist every day, every moment. And so wherever Ben is on the universal timeline, he's somewhere in this moment on that grounding spectrum. And so, again, what I was trying to propose earlier in the podcast is to stay grounded doesn't mean you just see yourself as tree roots, period. Now you're grounded, dude. Congrats. I think it's way more complex than that. And I think it is way more transitional than a simple, I'm this. So throw that back to you guys. What do you think?
This is a really neat aspect to kind of play with. And I was thinking it depends on where you're looking in the moment, right? Like if we use the tree analogy and I look at my roots, or I'm concentrating or focusing on my roots, then I am static. It doesn't look like I'm moving. There's no real shift or anything like that you can see in a short period of time in the now. But when I focus more upwards and outwards, when I'm looking at the sky, I'm looking at my leaves, I'm looking at the upper branches, there's lots of movement. There's interaction with the wind. There's interaction with other trees. There's quite a bit. So I think it has to do with where our perspective is in the moment that we're looking. That's my thoughts. Trav, what do you think?
I think more about your roots as a human. I think more about our roots as being where we come from. And because we are so mobile and we can use travel and all these things as a means to gain wisdom and knowledge and spread our influence to other places and be influenced by other people, I kind of look at the roots as more of where my beliefs came from, you know, what I hold in the core of my character as core beliefs, you know. A lot of people have, you know, religious beliefs where they come from, you know, those are their core beliefs. Those probably change throughout your life. And that's part of that movement that is ever present in all of us. You know, bring it back to being grounded again, you know, just like Sean said, like, where is Ben right now? You know, we ask these grand questions often, and there's these existential things that are usually a problem. You know, they're always associated with some kind of threat. There's never like, nobody ever says on the news, like, there's an existential, like, good that's coming for all of us. You know, nobody ever says that. It's always some apocalyptic event, you know? So I think, you know, bringing it back to the grounded is you got to recognize that nobody ever worries about the existential good that's coming from humanity. Like, look at all these positives that we've created in our lives, you know, from the first man who, you know, gave us the first spark of fire and like energy really that we could use for our benefit to what we have now. Nobody really discusses that. It's always this existential climate change or, you know, existential politician that's going to kill us all. Like, this is always what we talk about instead of, you know, making your bed.
Mm-hmm. I want to see a sandwich board that just says the beginning is near. And
Yeah, right. Yeah,
it's all coming.
we're
Ben,
way closer to the beginning than the end. Like,
yeah, 100%. Ben, what do you think?
No, I love that, Travis. That's awesome, man. That was really beautifully said. Yeah, man. I think at the end of the day, for me too, it's all of these meanings, groundedness or rootedness. That these are concepts, and at the end of the day, concepts are beautiful in so many ways because it lets us dance and play with words and ideas and these things, and one concept, two different concepts could mean the same thing almost identically for two different people. And I think that's kind of what we're doing right now. And my perspective on being, grounded or grounded or rooted, I can say rooted. I think I'd use both words there. Is maybe we just start using that. From my perspective, living the life that I've lived and doing a lot of the personal self work that I've done, I see everything as just one moment. There is no other moment. It's just this moment, and our perspective changes within the change of the moment. And so a lot of being rooted or grooted is about, I think for me, is about the knowing. It's about knowing, like we talked about, where are you currently positioned in your life, and having the curiosity to explore that space so that you can make the conscious choice of how rooted do you want to be or not. Not stuck in my head, but
Now,
you know what I mean? So it's about just understanding that there is this change happening, and we have the choice to do the self-reflection on where we want to take that as we're evolving and changing within the moment.
I'm digging this so much. Sean, what do you got?
So as at the start, Ben, I tried to establish the difference between being centered, which is more of an internal aspect, for lack of a better term, than being rooted or grooted, and that is more of the external aspect of things. And so one of the interesting things for me, and it's an important part of this conversation, I'm curious as to see what you guys think about this, is you can be centered. You can focus a lot of your life on gaining a really centered way of living. But it's not a great metric to get granularity on. And so you can live centered, but it's hard to metric it. It's hard to determine, am I a 7 out of 10 in outcome of joy, or am I a 8 out of 10 with inner peace at the moment? So all of these internal things, we're self-evaluating, but there's like no real ruler. There's no metric to put up against it and say, you're actually a 6.4 today. However, how grounded you are, again, is more focused on the external reality. And if we're talking about creating outcomes, as Travis has been talking about, action, like freaking make your bed, bro. There's a metric, instant metric. The groundedness of your life, you can evaluate outcomes. You can evaluate production. You can evaluate what have you created today? What have you created this year? And so your life, in a sense, can be evaluated, for lack of a better term, as to how much you're grounded. But it's much harder to granularly understand how much you're centered. And so grounded is a great thing to create outcomes. It's easy to see that you're in the game, but just focusing on your internal world as your centered self, it's hard to evaluate if you're doing well or not. So action, make your bed, as the example, is a great way to see instant small wins, instant understandings of, I can shape this reality. But if you're just locked in your inner world trying to shape your reality, the metrics aren't as easy to see. They're not up right in front of your face. So throwing that back at you guys, what do you think?
Coming right back to you, Ben. What do you got?
Yeah, what I would say is, I'm dancing with that in my mind right now, trying to connect some dots there. Lately I've been thinking a lot about this idea of re-engineering this concept that we throw out all the time called when we tell somebody they're self-centered. Oh, you self-centered person. You know what I mean? We label it as a bad thing. And through my own personal work, I'm starting to realize that if I slow that word down, the word self-centered is actually a good thing. It's like focusing on the self. I think and here's the challenge that I've ran into. Being a first responder myself, and working with so many first responders and veterans and war fighters and such, we tend to let go of the centeredness of ourself to focus on other people. And to the extent that we forget to focus on the centeredness of ourself until tragic things can happen. So for me, I'm focused on understanding how to be self-centered right now. And the metric I am measuring is how productive am I in creating positive thoughts in the things that I love doing. So I wake up every morning, I make my bed, I roll over to this desk that I'm sitting at right now, and I write in that moment the things that I'm feeling as soon as I wake up, just to understand what that centeredness is starting to look like. Because you're right, it's hard to measure sometimes. And then as I produce the rootedness or the groundedness that I'm having throughout the day, I have more of a actionable roadmap to accomplish the things that I love.
I love that.
Love it. Yep. Travis, what do you got?
Well, I spent, most of my life in the military as well. And even my dad was an Army guy, career Army guy too. So I kind of lived my entire life in that around those kind of men. And they measured guys' worth kind of on their selflessness, right? Instead of saying, being self-centered and worry about yourself, is like, what can you do to help everyone else? That was the measure of what sacrifice was all about and what service was all about, was being selfless. And I still think that that's true. And, kind of think what Ben's trying to get at is if you sacrifice your own well-being to the point that you're now a burden, you become a burden to everyone else. Like, that's not really beneficial. Like, are you helping us now? Are you truly selfless, or are you just foolish? If you don't stay, as a team guy, if you're not, physically fit, mentally tough and all those things, you become a burden, and that's not what we want either. So you got to find that point of selflessness and self-care there where you can continue to be a benefit to the group. I also think that human beings are a social animal, and I think you do need to have some personal time to think about yourself. But I think if you isolate yourself and there is no social interaction or minimal social interaction, then your mind can just wander and you kind of lose track of what's actually happening, and you're just in an imaginary space that we can ponder all of these, like, existential things that could possibly happen, and we're not sure what to do. And it's easy to go down that path of like what might or what if, or just being anxious about things, and letting your mind wander is way easier than putting your boots on and going out and doing the work, man. It's easier to just contemplate things than it is to do the work that's right in front of you. And if you do the work that's in front of you, it kind of brings things back into focus, and where you are, and why you're there, and you see something being accomplished, and then there is that metric that Sean talked about where things are happening, we're progressing. We had a problem, we reevaluated it, we saw a different angle, we went that way, we solved the problem, and then we moved on to the next thing. And that's very mentally beneficial. It's good for you to have those small victories and to keep progressing forward. I don't know how this fits in, but I'm sure my kids would know it. It's like I always say, the best lessons, they kind of hurt just a little bit. The best lessons probably stung. And when you're doing those things and you feel that sting, you reevaluate, then you remember those things later on. You can pass those bits of knowledge and wisdom on to the next generation. You know, I think that's an obligation we as humans have also, is to pass our lessons on to everybody around us so that they don't make the same mistakes we did. We can make new mistakes and learn new stuff.
Yeah. I think the question, at least that comes into my head, is like, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Like, is the end result worth the action right now? And to this point, I was thinking about how we had Greg Lappin on a little while ago, and we're gonna have him on again shortly. But he used the term self-centric versus self-centered, and I really like the way you put it, Ben, about being self-centered, being centered on yourself, in that everything comes from the self outwards, right? Versus if you're self-centric, if all your focus is on you, then you're excluding the things around you. And so I just wanted to kind of play with the wording on that. And I love being self-centered, because then your world begins at you and then goes outwards, versus being self-centric and being completely consumed by your own being and concept, because that can take you down some really big rabbit holes for sure. And I love this. Now I got a comment here from Dan C. I want to touch on. I get your guys' thoughts on. He says, I think the idea of being grounded in my mind has a lot to do with the self-awareness of your ego, where the ego comes from, and how you manage it. What do you guys think? Sean, I'm going to come to you first.
Well, I just want to pause for a sec and ask everyone to go back and listen to the last 15 minutes, because the things that were said are rarely said out loud in a group of guys. And now I know it's talked about. I know that it happens in rooms from time to time, but it rarely happens on the internet. It rarely happens in a podcast where, some dudes sit down and talk about this kind of stuff, trying to tease out the details of our own considerations on what appears to be a simple subject, but actually isn't a simple subject. And so go back and listen to what was said, because some freaking bombs were dropped, man. Bombs in your brain, if you were listening. They should be like exploding right now with tons of thoughts for the rest of the day. Like, you could stop now and your day would be full, considering what was said in the last 15 minutes. So don't overlook the importance of some of the words that were dropped and some of the sentences that are said, like in this setting right now, because I'm certainly not. Like, I'm taking it for what it is right now. It's freaking gold. And so take a moment and consider that. On this question with the ego, I think that the ego is part of our life on the, not just on the daily, in the now. And so how to manage that, the very word itself, as soon as someone throws ego into a sentence or you read it in your mind, right away, the actual word starts impacting the way you think, the way you hold your space, how you're going to deal with this question. And so your ego is actually involved in the discussion of ego. That's kind of a complex way to look at it, but that is kind of what's going on. We're pre-evaluating ourselves as we're about to give an evaluation on a word. And so I think the simplest way to answer this question from my perspective is this: I don't sweat the details. Like, I just freaking do my best, like it says directly up above. And by the way, me pointing at that little sign, that took me 2 years of social media experience to be able to do that. I was clueless as to social media, but now, like, I'm chillaxed enough, I'm in the moment enough, I'm grounded enough that I can simply do that and not freak out and feel like an imposter. And so I think when it comes to ego in these moments, just do your best to be your authentic self and not sweat the details. Because the moment that you start adding in all the unnecessary white noise details of what are they thinking, what am I thinking, what's going on around me right now, it becomes artificial. And humans can smell artificial from a mile away. And so if you're really trying to do your best in the moment, everyone will pick up what you're putting down. And ego actually won't be part of the problem. The problem will be there's not enough people feeling your authenticity.
Yeah, I really like that. Ben, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, for the way I look at the ego in this particular way is this, like, sometimes the definition of what the ego is gets lost on people. I know it's been lost on me plenty of times. The way I look at, just to relate it back to the self-centeredness, the groundedness, the rootedness, whatever we want to call it, it's why do I want to exist in those spaces? Why do I want to focus on this self-centeredness, like you were saying, Chance? Like it is exactly that. It starts at the center of you and pushes out. What am I trying to push out? Love. Love and fear exist on the same polarity. They're on the opposing side of the same circle. And so if I'm trying to exist in love, then my purpose becomes that love. If I'm aware of my ego, then I can make conscious decisions based on the fear that the ego creates, and choose a different path. Choose to stay rooted in my purpose. So the ego primarily makes fear-based choices, or helps you make fear-based choices. So becoming aware of the ego means that you become aware of your fear. And if you can become aware of your fear, then you can make a different choice, something towards love. And that's, I think, where we should all be focusing on.
Yeah, totally agree with that one. Trav, what do you got?
Ben's right. Like, really, like, I think people, when you hear the word ego, you automatically kind of associate that with a negative, like egotistical and kind of being like narcissistic and things. And then there's obviously several definitions. And one of those is just the consciousness, the conscious part of your psyche that makes you aware, you know. And if you are a confident person, you know, and you know what you're capable of and what you're not capable of, and you have the humility to like learn and take that in, then your ego won't be a problem per se. You know, it's when your ego, your attitude might prevent you from listening, you know, for example, and being so confident in your own position that you're just unwilling to accept any other reality, you know. And that's where I think Sean talked earlier about, you know, that one end of the grounded spectrum that does not allow you to accept any other facts. You know, you're just so confident in your own position that you can't progress. You know, you're just stuck kind of. And you know, generally people think about the ego as being that person who's just like, it's my way or the highway type of guy, but it's not always that way. It's just I think it's just your ego is just the conscious part of yourself, that you know what you're capable of, what you're not capable of, how you progress. And I mean, for I think most people, honestly, it's a good thing to understand that.
Yeah, and being able, first off, like as he says in the thing, being aware of it is the start. And then once you figure that out, like, oh yeah, I have an ego and it's actually engaging in my life without me thinking about it. Maybe I should do something about that, and then work your way down from there. I just want to throw this up here real quick. DogTube jumped in here. This screens are starting to get to me. How's it going, buddy? And Sean, you got any other thoughts on any of this? Because I got a question on all this, but if you got some thoughts, I want to jump through it.
Just real quick, I mean, like the ego is a pretty big subject. I think we've done an entire podcast on it in the past. Yeah, a couple, right. And so, like, it's a big deal. And it's not like as simple as, you know, your ego gets involved and then you got to balance your ego and yada, yada. Like, we'd need a couple of days to talk about ego and just on that simple question. But I stand by the things that have been said by the panel, and what I'm hearing is correct. These are things that you've got to give some thought, and not just a glancing thought. You should take a day to think about what ego means to you. And then once you've got an idea of the definition, you should think how that relates to you. Like, how do you fit into that sort of ego equation? I've learned a ton about myself since we started talking about ego in the podcast. Like, no one's got it figured out. No one's like the grand poobah of ego. We're all on a scale of trying to figure things out in life. And so if you're not in the curiosity game, if you're not in the betterment game, if you're not focused in becoming a better version of yourself for those around you, then ego is just a simple word with 3 letters in it, and it means nothing. But if you're truly curious to do better in life, again, if it's for your family, for your community, for your your brohemages, whatever it is that drives you, your sense of purpose, ego is something that deserves more than a fleeting glance as to its simple definition. And so I'd refer everyone to, the podcast we've done in the past, or, chance maybe we need to do another podcast in the near future to crack that thing out of the park, because it is a tough subject that has no simple answer, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that one. What do you got, Trev?
I think, well, getting back to like what Sean said a few minutes ago, is just like kind of recognizing the discussion, like the discussion we're having right now. The four of us, I would assume from the outsider's perspective of our little worlds, they'd probably like, these guys are all egomaniacs, like they would describe our ego as like, probably a negative way to represent us. And the reality is, like, we're all like, I just want to hear what you guys have to say, man. Like, I love coming on these because I get to listen to everybody just kind of like brainstorm stuff. It's not, I don't know anything, I'm just trying to learn from everybody else. And having those kind of discussions is rad, and it kind of does ground you to understand that you're not the only one that doesn't know what's going on, man. Like, everybody's trying to figure it out, dude. And we're doing the best we can, I started this thing, like, I got my dad last Christmas. I got him this book, and it's the Daily Stoic book, where there's a meditation every day, and you read it. So we got this deal where, every day we read our meditation, and then, we have a text thread that's like, because I'll get a text. He's, in North Carolina, so I'll get the text, at 3 a.m. here in Idaho, and like, oh man, today's a good one. And we're just having a discussion. His take on it, my take on it, not always the same, but it's just discussing things and brainstorming together as men, and kind of doing the best we can, man, figuring it out.
Yeah, I love that. And to that point, I actually have the Daily Stoic, the journal, which I really love. It's got the same prompts and stuff in it, but the ability to have these discussions is, as you said, a grounding experience. And this is something that Sean and I have said on a number of times. Like, if we don't have these discussions on Friday, if we don't have the podcast set up, it feels weird. Like, we feel there's like a withdrawal almost after a couple of days, just like, why haven't I talked about these subjects with people? And, and Sean, to your point, earlier, just pointing up here, every moment, do your best every day. I remember you and I having a conversation about, like, is that really what we want to put at the top of the screen? Is that something that we want to just like espouse? Yet, I don't know how many podcasts we've done now, and every single time we're like, every moment, do your best every day. Part of that game. And I love it. But I have a question for y'all, and I want to get some actionable items in this. And grounding is not an easy thing to do, but for somebody that is, they came into the conversation, they're listening now, and they're like, man, I've always wanted to be grounded. I've never felt grounded. What do I even start with? How do I even get there? Where's the beginning in your eyes? Because I know it's going to be different for each of us, where we got to a point where we were grounded, but where did it start for you? And perhaps maybe, how can we help others reach the same position? I'm going to start with Ben. You look like you had a good thought on that. What do you got?
Okay. Yeah. Where does it start? It's hard to say. I mean, there's so many things that will capture a person's ability to be grounded in so many different types of moments. We can throw things out like, just sitting here, stillness, and finding my breath, meditation, mindfulness, things of this nature. You can create a mindfulness practice and a way to calm everything down in just one breath if you focus hard enough. So for me, my groundedness comes through the actionable steps of finding stillness, through the process of just quieting the noise. Just like, I'm just going to quiet the noise inside of me, inside of my head, inside of everything else. Just going to take a moment for myself. But also, what we're doing right now is a perfect way to ground yourself. I think the art of communication with people is so important. One of my needs in life is to share perspective. If I was to take this phone, this conceptual thing in my hand called a phone, we are all looking at it. I'm looking at the front of this phone. You guys are looking at the back of this phone. We understand we're looking at a phone. But by you describing what you're looking at and what I'm describing what I'm looking at, we get to collectively turn this phone and understand it better. And I think it's through the art of sharing our perspectives in a way to understand each other also grounds me. It also brings me into a space where I can get to know other perspectives and understandings, and it creates a peace inside of my mind where I'm leaving assumption out of it, and I can guide myself with more intention. So there's lots of ways to ground yourself: physical exercise, good relationships, reading books, taking cold showers. There's so many different ways to drop into that space, I think.
I love that. Travis, what are you thinking? What's your way?
What do you want to do today? Start with that. What do you want to do today? Make a list. All right. Do those things. At the end of the day, did you do those things? Yes or no? Why did you not do them? Because I got distracted by X, Y, or Z. Don't let that happen again. Tomorrow, what do you want to do? Okay, make the list. Did you do those things? Yes or no? No, I got distracted again. Okay, well, now we need to break down why you're becoming distracted. What's happening that's pulling you away from what you want to do? What is it that's pulling you away from what you want to do? Do you get sucked into the internet noise? Do you get sucked into that and then lose track of where you are? Are you doom scrolling all day? Like what's pulling you away from what you want to do, right? Let's say, what do you want to do between the time you wake up? We can even start with that. What time do you want to wake up in the morning and start your day? Like I want to wake up at 5:30 in the morning, but I always crawl out of bed at freaking 9:30. Okay, well, we need to change that. And at some point, you're going to have to take ownership of what you're allowing and what your responsibility in that is. And you're going to have to actually do something, because action is where it changes. You have to take the time to make to focus on the quiet. If that's your thing, and you got to make the time to do that and focus on it. I suffer from an inability to have a quiet mind. I find it impossible for me to quiet my mind, and the only thing that really brings me real quietness and lack of noise is focus on a thing. So if I'm shooting per se, I'm focused, dude. Like I'm putting those rounds where they need to go, and I can be in the exact moment that I need to be in when I'm practicing that skill, and it's one of the few things that really gets it quiet down. I haven't done it in a long time because I've been doing the RV thing, but I used to reload all my ammo, and if you're kind of not paying attention, I mean, things can go sideways, dude. So if, that was a time where I'm focused and all the external noise was gone, and I'm just focused on this one thing, and I can achieve quiet to me, right? My quiet is not the same as Ben's quiet or Sean's or yours. It's just my quiet is focus on one thing, and I'm able to do that one thing. Which for some people is hard because, they have all the other things banging around in their head and they just can't get rid of it. There's things that I think for a lot of kind of action-minded people, like skydiving, if you're not really paying attention during that event, things can go sideways. So it's very therapeutic for people to skydive. They're like, oh my God, that's so dangerous. How could you possibly do that? It's like, bro, it's awesome. I'm just totally in the zone. I'm quiet. Everything's peaceful. It's great. What do you mean it's dangerous? Like, that's not even a part of my thought process. It's like, wow, this is rad. And you're just focused, and I kind of lost track of where I'm at. I'm just rambling on.
There you go. I like it.
It's cool because you're just kind of like brainstorming, dude. And
so I wonder something on that. This is just something in my own curiosity. I wonder how much you said earlier that the best lessons have a little bit of sting to them.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much the action-oriented mindset that you're talking about requires that there be a major consequence if your attention is not there. So, as you said with reloading, if your attention's not there, bad things happen. If you're not paying attention with a firearm, bad things happen. If you're not paying attention while you're skydiving, bad things happen, right? So there's a consequence there, and I wonder how much that plays into your groundedness is that there's the sting is higher. If that makes sense. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible. Very likely, maybe. I don't know that it's true. Is there an alarm going off in my place somewhere?
I think somewhere in your place. Yeah. Sean, what do you think? What are you going at?
So I do think that there is something there. And in respect to people who are used to action orientation, I think that it's a topic that we could cover for another half hour at least. And so yesterday I'd put up a video, and it's me in front of a heavy bag, and I'm standing on one leg. I'm super calm, super still, and I just simply relayed that meditation comes in many forms. And so I can meditate on a log staring at a sunset in nature, or I can do it in front of a heavy bag. And so I illustrated that yesterday by doing my freaky little freak show. But I was doing it all with a still mind, like a centered spirit. I was in effect grounded, and not just martial arts grounded, base posture structure. I'm talking about like as an entity. I was grounded when I was doing that, but it's not easy to do it. But that's a result of many years of improving my ability to do it in nearly any moment. And so that is important to me, that I can take my sense of groundedness, whether I'm meditating as I'm in my reading chair in the morning and just, letting the thoughts and emotions and feelings and let them kind of take their form of existence so I can consider them. The still meditation is just the same as the moving meditation for me. Shredding on a mountain bike is my Zenerific time. Like, I don't have to do a whole lot of thought. I've done enough riding and racing that Sean doesn't need to think. Sean just needs to exist in the moment, flow across the planet, and exist in it, rather than trying to be all about it. I don't need to do tail whips up in the air, but if I do a tail whip, it's because that was what was right in the moment for me and how I exist in that moment. So I've been forcing my understanding for decades of what meditation means and stillness means and being grounded and centered means. I've been not just experimenting in that arena, I've been forcing myself in that arena to really expand my understanding of what works for Sean. And in so doing, I've come to understand how it can work for others to some degree. And so I just don't want anyone out there to lock into the idea that getting grounded or being still or being quiet in your mind requires like bell chimes in the background. It doesn't require any like rose petals and patchouli either. What it does require is you to consider what feels right to you. And so today I dropped a video just before we came into this podcast, and all I titled it was Staying Grounded, I believe. And so I took a photo this morning of myself sitting in my coffee chair in the living room, just looking out the window as I do every freaking day. I sit down, I relax, and I tune into the world around me. And usually it's just by looking out the window, not daydreaming, but not hyper focused on anything. I feel my feels. And so I took a photo of that. And then I took a photo of me standing down in front of the heavy bag this morning, just tuning into the moment. And then I started playing around with the heavy bag. And you'll see in the video that I'm not being a freak. I'm just being in the moment. And so at the end of my training session, I'll call it loosely, my meditative training session, I'm just cross-legged, facing away from the camera, looking out to nature, which is just outside our, out the window that you can see in the image. All of that to say, what I tried to do was relay a simple protocol that I've been using for a redonkulous amount of years to see how I'm showing up this morning. Who am I today? Am I grounded? Am I capable of keeping a still mind? My routine that has been set for a long time, is it showing me if I'm unstable as I start off my day. And by unstable, I mean at a granular level, my expectations of my baseline of how capable or uncapable am I in this moment. And if I'm off base, or if I need a recalibration, or if I'm not like as I should be, then I take a moment to think about why, and then I get back on track. And so, to use Travis's example as he kicked off the podcast, stating, "Hey, don't worry about the cataclysmic event that your poster says that you're stomping around protesting about. Don't worry about that stuff. Just make your freaking bed." So, if we use the bed as the example, if I'm making the bed and it doesn't feel like I feel right, if I feel like I'm not like in it properly, then I'm not going to go any further in my day before I think about the why. Why am I not making the bed the way I feel it should be made today? What is off? It's not enough to like have a bunch of off moments and just let them slip by. All of these off moments should be points of millisecond consideration. Why do I feel that way? Why do I feel that way? I believe that's one of the best ways that you can throughout your day be grounded. An actionable point is making your bed, but the more important actionable point is understanding why you're making it and why do you feel how you feel.
I really like the why aspect. I was going to mention that earlier, but I figured it would come up in the conversation eventually. The one of the things that I noticed for myself, especially in the mornings, I take my kids to school every day, and there's lots of times I use this as an example. I think last week, but there's lots of times where the busyness of the morning, right? You got to get up, you get the kids up, you got to get things out, you got to get the packages, blah 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 blah. You get the kids out the door, get them in the car, get them off, and then there's traffic, and there's all these things that can pull you away from the moment. But the beautiful part, as you said, Sean, is the why. Why am I doing all this? What is the purpose behind it? Well, man, I don't remember being dropped off at school by my parents ever. I remember taking the city bus to school for years and years and years and years. And now I get to take my kids to school every day. I get to hug them before they go in the door. I get to say I love them, and I get to pat them on the head and have a great day, nerd, and send them on inside. Those larger, I guess this is the sign we were talking about earlier, Travis, is that you got your the beginning is near. It's in those moments when you can back up your why with the actionable item that you're doing. If I want to make my bed so that I have a more grounded morning, well, then every time I make my bed, I can touch onto that why with an actionable intent and make the bed. It looks good. And I'm not doing it because my drill instructor 20 years ago said that I need to make my bed every day. It's because I want the day to start that way. And then I can continue to work through it that day. And I didn't learn this until many, many, many years through making tons of mistakes, not understanding what grounding is, thinking that it had to be some sort of meditation, had to be some sort of quiet. And as you guys were talking, it made me think of an article I read many years ago. And it was a gentleman who had spent 3 years in a Buddhist monastery overseas and lived that life and did all the meditations, did all the things. And then he moved back to the city and he found that he could not meditate, and he got really upset about it. And it started to bug him because the noises were different, because there weren't the wind chimes, there wasn't the flapping of the flags, it wasn't the peace and quiet of the mountains. But eventually he talked to another guru and talked it through, that the noises aren't it's not the important part. It's the centering, it's the action of doing the meditation. And eventually he found that he could use the noises from the cars as the noises from the wind chimes, and you can start to tune into those things and be grateful for them rather than look at them as interferences, I guess. What do you guys think? Ben, I'm going to come back to
you. Yeah, I think the stillness, even the groundedness, that it all shows up when you do what Travis and Sean have been talking about, is you focus on one thing and you do it the best that you possibly can. That's where you find that stillness and that kind of peace. That's why there's an assortment of things, whether it's making reloads or running on a trail or shredding on your mountain bike. If you focus on doing that one thing the best that you can, you enter into that flow state where stillness is found. And the other thing, that's why making your bed is so profound, because you wake up in the morning and you focus on one thing: make your bed the best you can in that day. And then you just repeat that and it becomes a habit. And then you do that with the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And all of a sudden, guess what? You're grounded. Like, and you're carrying yourself through the day that way. And there's a mantra that I have. It's that I found when I was trying to create stillness and groundedness within me when I was going through a hard period of time in my life. And the mantra is, like the grass, like the stone, like the tree, I must be presently. The grass is only trying to do one thing: be grass. The stone is only trying to be a stone, and the tree is only trying to be its tree. They are focusing on stillness. They are all very grounded in the being of their presence. My focus is to be like that, is to focus on one thing at a time, one foot in front of the other. The path is walked by one step. And if you can bring your focus to that stuff and just do the best you can within every step, then you're going to get there for sure.
Yeah. Love that. Trav, you got any thoughts? Oh, you got to unmute yourself though.
We keep hitting on all these cool little mantras and like t-shirts and stuff, but I think we invented the next collective t-shirt, which is the beginning is near. I think that should be,
I'm writing it down.
Shirt, and if you guys don't make it, I'll do it. like the beginning is near. That's pretty awesome. I think I will wear that to my next protest.
I love it.
There are a lot of resources to help us all figure it out, like how to be grounded and stuff, and we've discussed a lot of them. And the slogans are great. The Stoic books are great. The Taoist stuff, the Buddhist stuff, all that stuff is cool and helpful. But what really matters is like taking the action to do so. Right? You have to follow through with the action in order to achieve. It can't just be a thought. It has to manifest in some kind of action. So that's an important part of this whole thing is how do I do it? It's like Nike, man. You just do it. You gotta bite the bullet, take the first step, and a myriad of other t-shirt slogans that we can all pull out that, but they all culminate with some kind of action and, do the work that's in front of you.
I love it. We got Lori Denman jumped in on the Instagram side, said Zen Hour is my CrossFit. And, everybody's got their thing, which I'd love to hear more. So if you guys are watching right now, hit us up in the comments and let us know what some other things.
Lori Denman is my mom.
Oh, nice.
And she's in her 70s. She's a stud. And I challenge anybody that's listening to go to her CrossFit gym and challenge her at CrossFit. I would like to see how humbled you are in front of my mom at CrossFit.
I love it. I might have to go check that out. I got another comment on the Instagram side. Says MW Hockey Photo says the word I like to use is focused instead of grounded or centered because it's easier to understand. I love my to-do lists, daily and monthly lists help me keep you focused and continued progress. Yeah, listing anything where you can write it down, check little boxes off. My buddy Ash that was out at Seb's place the other day, he's big on those, and it's like, just make your list, make little boxes, make them clean and neat so that you can check them off and it makes it look good, feel good, that kind of stuff. Sean, you got any thoughts on any of this?
First of all, Lori Denman, you're cool as hell. I didn't know that it was your mom's, but man, like she's always in with the right likes and the right comments. Now I know who it is. It's even cooler. So props to you, Lori Denman. So what I will say is this. I just want to tease out the details. And it's not that I'm disagreeing with focus is a great word in respect to this topic. However, just to twist the blade to keep things interesting. I think that grounded is looking down at your feet and knowing where you are right freaking now. Focused is as you lift your head up, bam, where are you going? That's the focus. So, when you get out of bed and put both feet on the ground, now you're grounded, but your focus is what's next. That's making the freaking bed. And so focus is, to me, a different thing than grounded. And so I'll try to maybe build that out in a different way so it makes sense. If you're really grounded, that means that you've made your bed a million times and you know it like the back of your hand. You don't even have to think. Much like when I'm riding a mountain bike, I don't have to think. Much like everyone on this panel, every dude here is good enough at something that it happens automagically. It's just offloaded as an autonomous response. And so we're good at something. Everyone in the world is good at something. That is the ability to do something based on a grounded understanding. And to be grounded and auto-magically flow across the planet, you've got to have existed on the spectrum of groundedness all the way from dogmatic right through to almost like crazy. And so the sweet spot being a creative artist, or in the flow zone, as it were, to be there, you've got to have understood a whole bunch of ways that you work as a grounded person. And grounded, by the way, to do anything great for your focus in the near future requires a super stable foundation. Like you can't be on the head of a needle as your foundation and punch into greatness, because you don't have a stable platform to do that. If your focus is to do great things, you can't do it from a tiny little unstable foundation. You've got to have been in the game for a while of producing routine results or outcomes that you can kind of establish that my foundation is good. I'm grounded in this moment. Now I can enter the flow zone. Now I can be creative. Now I can just like let things unfold. And so grounded isn't just a simple word that to me means focus. Focus and grounded are two different things. And maybe I'm teasing the devil in the details out of that sort of semantics, as it were, but I'm curious as to what you guys think.
What? Sean teasing out the details? I would never have thought that happened. Come on now. Ben, what do you think? I'm coming to you.
Yeah, I guess I would say, becoming grounded is establishing, like Sean was saying, that this foundation, maybe producing a vision of some sort. Focus allows you to create this vision, and like these are the actionable steps. But at the end of the day, like Travis has been saying, man, none of this happens unless you produce a product, and unless you take steps, unless you produce action. So I think focus, it's all works together in some way, as far as I'm concerned. But focus to me is seeing the vision out in front of you. The next thing is to actually make the move.
I like it. Trev, what are you thinking?
I think Sean he's probably just dancing on the edge, right? He's right there at that right kind of, there's a space somewhere between like definitely grounded and definitely crazy. That's kind of like the gray area where we're not really sure. But what I would say is like in the flow state, it's when you'll hit a gap on your mountain bike that you were like, it wasn't really a thing. You just kind of did it and you didn't even know. But then after the fact, you'll look back on it and be like, bro, that was sick. Like, that was insane. And people would be like, I can't even believe you even attempted it. And you're like, I didn't even think, like, I didn't even see it. Like, it just happened. And I did it because I was just in the zone, And I'm sure surfers and skateboarders and, in shooting, when everything slows down and everything is clean and you're just in that zone, you know what I mean? And that's where like kind of the magic happens and you progress forward. You do have that foundation, but I guess it allows the flow to occur, and what Sean was saying earlier about having some bit of tenure, to make that happen, to get to the point where you can really kind of let go of your conscious fear and just go with it, go with the moment, and magic happens, and then doors are opened and new ideas are created, and that happens on in every job site, in every action sport, in every profession, and wherever their person is sitting. But when they're in that state, is like it's pretty rad to achieve, and that's kind of where the magic happens, I think.
Yeah, I really like the concept, and it's interesting because I've used a term, and I want to see what you guys, how you feel about this, is that being in that zone, being in the flow, being in these things, I like to refer to it as a soft focus. It's not so much that I am focused on any one thing, and I use it in jiu-jitsu all the time, and I know Sean's going to poke at me later for bringing this up in the conversation, but I like to, I'm no longer focused on any one thing. I'm no longer focused on any particular role or where the move is or where the item is or where the limb is or what thing I'm trying to seek at the moment. I'm just kind of soft focusing, seeing what's happening. And then I'm moving based off of what is happening. And that flow state is it's a beautiful thing to step into. And I really love it. Now, MW Hockey Photo jumped in here and responded, said, I see your point and agree 100%. The looking back on my goals every day and seeing if the goals I have set forth are taking me in the direction of becoming the person I want to be, which is different from focus. Yeah, which is exactly it. So what do you guys think of the term soft focus? I'm going to come back to you, Travis. Would that fit?
Well, I think soft focus would be the ability to focus on multiple things at once. In the reality of human vision, your eyeballs are only capable of focusing in on one plane of view, you know, whether that's your target, whether it's your front sight post or your rear sight. You have to choose one of these things to be successful and to focus on it. But when you achieve the flow, right, when you're in the zone, you're able to see multiple things at one time, and everything is just gelling and coming together, you know. And I don't want to sound like that weirdo surfer dude, like, yeah, pitted, whatever, but that's kind of like how it is, you know. And it I don't know, it's like indescribable with like words, you know, like how did you see that? Like, I didn't see it, I knew it would be there, you know. Like, it's that weird, like, sixth sense human intuition thing that just is weird, man. How do you explain that? And it is that state, you know, soft focus or the zone, the flow, whatever you want to call it. But it's it definitely exists, you know. And I think most of us have been there at some point. And once you're there, you're kind of like after it more and more. Like, it's really cool, and you want to achieve it again. And that's kind of why we have these chats, you know, like, hey, how can I find this again? You know, like, how can I achieve this more often? You know, how can I make it easier to get there? I think through all the talks I've had, I find that it's never easy to get there. It's rare and it's rad. And once we see it, we're all striving for it, but there's no promise. You might not ever see it again, and none of us are going to stop seeking it. Regardless, you know, you tell, like, hey, Sean, you're never going to see that again, and he's going to be after it. No matter what I say, he's going to be after it no matter what. You know, I could be right, and it won't matter, because he's still going to be going after it no matter what, you know, because he's tasted it a little bit and he wants it again. Yeah. So
I could just see Sean's response to that too, which would be like, you think I'm never going to see it again?
You are correct.
I'll show you in a second. Ben, you got any thoughts?
Pedal harder.
Yeah, exactly. Pedal harder. Ben, you got any thoughts?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I'm just agreeing with everyone. Just sitting here shaking my head. You know, the flow state for me is, you know, I agree. You could kind of call it whatever you want: soft focus, moment, groundedness, whatever it is. Like, that state of being is, you've basically turned on this complicated antenna that your body mind system is, and you are in it. You know what I mean? You're just flowing with everything. It's, to me, the most worthy thing to chase ever, is that state of existence, that state of being. And if you can do it with consciously and focus with it, utilizing this meat sack I call a body to make it work and get there, that's what's up, man. The problem is, and just talk about the dark side of it, is people can get wrapped up in choosing external things to get them there, in the way of alcohol or drugs or whatever addiction. So if you can do it from a more, whatever natural means, but like natural state, where you're actually creating goals, like people are saying, and doing things that you truly love that make you a better version of yourself, that's what's up.
Yeah, I was actually thinking when we were just talking there, it kind of sounds like chasing the dragon, right? It's like you're constantly seeking that little bit, that next little bit, but no, it doesn't always come. Sean, you got any thoughts on this?
I do. I think it's important that everyone understands that achieving a flow state is available to anyone on the planet. All you got to do is choose a thing and start getting good at it. Doesn't matter what it is. Coffee, you want to start making good coffee? World's best coffee for you? Well, start doing it. Start focusing on tomorrow, I'm going to make a better cup of coffee. And after 1,000 cups of 1,000 betterments, eventually, I'm going to say it, there is no spoon. And that's the way it is, man. Like, that is what's up. The better you are at something, the less it exists as a thing. It simply becomes you in the moment, exploring and creating your best version of yourself right freaking now. But that's a hard thing to chew on if you've never been in that zone once, ever in your life. If you've never felt the beauty of just simply being an existence in the moment and having it all just flow the way you want it to, and perhaps even not even how you want it to, but how it's just supposed to. Well, that is a level that is appealing. It's intriguing. It is beautiful. And so once you've tasted it, once you've felt it, once you've been in it, you'll want more. But the only way to get there is to do a thing long enough and well enough that eventually the thing disappears and simply you are then it. So Travis is an example talking about shooting, as he well knows. If you've done it enough, under enough pressure and enough velocity and enough of a complexity to it, eventually the complexity disappears. In fact, it all just disappears. You're simply in it, in the moment, not controlling it, but being an active participant in shaping the outcome without working too hard, without trying to impose your will on it. You simply exist in the moment and make things happen, as it were. And so it's a hard thing to explain. But what is harder, I believe, is the follow-on understanding. And that is, if you've tasted it, how do you get more of it? And for me, I decided a while ago that I'm simply going to try to flow the rest of my life in every single moment that I can, in all the tiny moments. Throwing my leg over my mountain bike before I even stomp that first pedal, that's me trying to be in the flow zone. And for me to get there, what I absolutely have to tell myself is disappear in this moment. I can't be a sort of personality in that moment. I just have to exist in the moment and see what shows up. And that doesn't mean that I can't control the moment. I can certainly shape it, but I'm not giving away my personal agency by saying, okay, I don't exist in this moment. Let's just see what shows up. Of course I'm in the game, but it's that tension between the operating state of being controlling of the moment and just simply existing in the moment. That tension always exists. At least it does for me. The moment that you can give away a little bit of your, not personal agency, but your control of things and see what shows up, that's when flow starts showing up. So, give up some of your control in your day to the thing that's directly in front of your nose and see how it plays out, rather than your old patterns that aren't increasing your flow state. Give up some old patterns and just see if a new pattern emerges. Observe that new pattern, see how it feels, because this is really important. If whatever you're doing doesn't feel like cool to you, that ain't a thing to pursue for flow state. You've got to kind of dig what you're doing. You kind of got to see some love in the moment for what you're engaged in. Otherwise, it's just homework. It's just an academic practice that you will begrudgingly work your way through. That's why as a young buck, martial arts for me was a way to I feel like I am Bruce Lee, you know what I'm saying? Like I love the martial arts. I feel like I've got martial arts spirit in me. And so I want to explore that. And it doesn't mean that I'll ever be an amazing martial artist, because that ain't my focus. Martial arts is the proxy, it is the platform, it is the tool that I use to understand other parts of me, how to get into the flow zone. Because I've been doing martial arts long enough, I don't have to worry about artificially constructing an idea of who I am. I just get to play with it because I've been doing it so long. So find something that you love and start engaging in it for a long time.
I love it. I could not agree more, and it's one of the things that you have taught me, and many of the other people that have been on the show have taught me, is that you really have to dive in and you have to let go. And it actually goes back to Ben, what you were talking about earlier, in that to be self-centered, right? If you focus on you in that moment, that will teach you the lessons that you can then learn to fall into that flow state. And I have a question for you guys. Perhaps maybe the last question of the conversation today, but the title here says staying grounded. Do you think it's possible to stay grounded at all times? Or do you think that it requires kind of you have to drop out of a groundedness and then kind of come find your way back in? And does it require that little bit of conflict? Or do you think that is there a way to just completely be grounded? What do you guys think? I'm going to come back to Sean right away. Boom. What do you got?
There probably is a way, but I've never actively sought it because that's not who I am. And so I think that's important for everyone to hear. Like, I consider myself as a bit of a chaotic agent as well. So I'm not so linear that I'm highly predictable. I do have some chaos in my lifestyle, or how I like to run my life. And so that feels right to me. As I feel like as an agent of change, I'll loosely call it, I can't just run one program. I have to do things a bunch of different ways. Mostly, I have to do things wrong a bunch of different ways until I start to figure out better ways to do things. So to your question, I think you've got to know who you are at your core and what works best for you at your core before you start to try to redesign your core. Use your core to explore the idea and then start shaping the idea, as it were.
You definitely are a chaotic neutral or a chaotic good character, that's for sure. Ben, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's infinite possibilities. So I'm sure being grounded 100% of the time is absolutely one of those possibilities. I think it's, like we've been saying, if you find something that really excites you and you put forth the actionable steps and focus to creating that thing, you enter a state of flow. I don't see why, if someone truly focused on creating actionable steps to being grounded, that couldn't take place for somebody. I do see, though, that at least for my story, pain and deviating from a centeredness state, and how entering a state of dis-ease and how that creates pain in my life has always given me a choice to come back to being centered. And I do see that discomfort and pain is something that carries us away from centeredness and back to groundedness, and it continues to teach us how to be there. Because the further you deviate from that groundedness, centeredness, however you want to call it, the more pain you're going to experience. So for me, my awareness around that particular thing, pain, has been like probably the greatest teacher for me at maintaining some sort of groundedness and flow state and centeredness. It's all part of it.
Love it. I love it. I personally believe that conflict is required. I think that's in my personal view, but I love what you guys are saying. Travis, what do you think?
I think there is some conflict required for myself as well. Like, chaos is kind of where my life is too, but that's good for me, white space on the calendar is not good for me. Like that is not like I'll fill that right up, there's those old adages like the devil finds work for idle hands, more t-shirts, I guess. But I think it's always like the tides, man. It ebbs and flows, you're everything is gelling and you're super, the weeks are flowing and everything's great. And then there's, who knows what happens. And then there's chaotic moments and then you have to respond to those and get yourself back into that grounded state and focus on what you can affect and not let the weather, change your whole state of being because you can't control the weather. Something that's happened to me recently, I'm in a flight program. So when there's an inversion in the Treasure Valley, like there's not really any flying going on, so what are you going to do? Like, are you going to complain about no flying? No, I'm going to hit the sim, hit the books and take this opportunity to do the things that I do on the ground to make me a better pilot. So, it's just a matter of like seeing the problem and adjusting your daily flow to that problem and dealing with it in a positive way and staying focused on what you can affect and not worrying about the existential threat that you can't affect, right? The beginning is near. So, take action right now.
I love it. I love it. You're now in charge of the collective's t-shirt department.
Friggin' Travis on a roll.
Yeah. The beginning is nigh. I love this.
It is a thing, but it's always moving around. The needle is always moving. So, we just have to adjust to whatever situation is currently occurring.
Mm-hmm. I love this, and yeah, you're now hired.
I want to throw something. Yeah, I want to throw something in there for everyone who's listening. One thing that this panel does have a slight advantage on is that we've made enough mistakes, we've explored enough with our curiosity. We've all built to some degree a reasonably strong foundation to allow us to enter into our day with a curiosity and an ability to improvise, adapt, and overcome. And so when I started off my morning, I didn't know how my morning was going to go. I didn't have like this grand scheme of trying to accomplish certain things. I just let my day unfold and with a spirit of kind of adventure, as it were. And so I'm not too worried about what I'm doing 2 hours from now because I know it'll be rad because I'll freaking make it rad. And that's kind of important, I think, for people to hear. That this idea of trying to understand groundedness or try to kind of have conversations about groundedness, it shouldn't suck. It should stoke you up. It should make you feel like, let's freaking go, baby. And so you've got to find your way to consider groundedness as not lame. It should be like the best present you ever give to yourself because you'll kick so much ass if you learn how to get stable foundation in life to go and do things. And so, I hope this all didn't sound like homework in our conversation because that's not what I took away. In fact, I'm already stoked about the topic well before we had this conversation, but this conversation has elevated my sense of how much I love being grounded. What do you guys think?
I'm in the same boat. Trav, what do you think?
I mean, it's awesome. I love these conversations. It's rare that I can just ramble on and dudes will listen to me and like I lose track of what I'm talking about, but I think it's just a wholesome exchange of ideas amongst men, like, hey, we can talk about this stuff. And like, what am I talking about again? Like, dude, you just went off on a tangent, but it was cool. I mean, whatever, I'm going to have to run it back and listen to it again because I don't even know what I was talking about. But I mean, it's cool to be comfortable enough in this environment to just kind of let your mind wander like that. Is that the flow state? Thanks for helping me get there. Like that's just cool. And you don't need a surfboard or a mountain bike to do that. Sometimes you can just ponder things, man. You can just wonder about things and be curious, and I'm getting lost again.
That's all good.
It's good.
Conversational flowing right here.
Yeah.
Ben, what are you thinking?
I mean, for sure. I think this type of stuff, you just these types of let me just say this, I guess. Speaking of going into the depths of my consciousness and my awareness and being able to speak freely and is flow for me. That's probably one of the most exciting things I get to do nowadays as I grow older and have built the courage and ability to be vulnerable and express my mind, especially with men. Like it's been honestly like a blessing to be able to find that flow state in there. It is very, very grounding. And I agree. I love being grounded. I love being able to move about my day and smiling, because that's usually what happens when I'm grounded. Smiling a lot.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. When I feel really grounded, I'm enjoying life. Every part of it is enjoyable. And I got two comments here, and I got a question for us all, and we'll use that as our kind of final thoughts here. So the comment right off the bat, KH jumped in here. He said, it's a woven line. He's talking about groundedness. It's a woven line. Every moment of groundedness grows into a secured rope anchored to a beginning. Each moment of growth strengthening the line. And I really love that because, yeah, if you're weaving a line together, you're going to have difficulty, you're going to have pain, you're going to have groundedness, you're going to have stability, you're going to have all the things mixed together that create a very strong rope, which is fantastic.
Hey, so just let me throw this out there, and we don't have time to build it out, but it's a great idea. However, I think that there's something to be said about what kind of rope are we talking about, because you can have like a handy dandy black curtain mantle rope that is, great for doing certain jobs, and then you've got a big thick rope that you use to kind of secure a massive oil tanker, and those two ropes work differently.
Yeah.
One's flexible, one's inflexible, one's this, one's that, one's heavy to carry, one's easy to deploy. I mean, just using the rope analogy as the example, we could do a whole podcast on. So I love the idea, but it's worth bearing some thought as to what kind of rope are you trying to build.
Bam.
You can also hang yourself with the rope.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boom, dropping bombs right at the end. Oh man, maybe we should do a podcast on the rope. That'd be fantastic.
Either way, I think whoever KH is after my t-shirt job.
Oh snap! He is actually. He's got a few good lines coming throughout the show. So the question I have from Ethos and Eris Project on the Instagram side, I want to hit this before we shut her down, is how much of the stability do you attribute, the stability that we have now, do you attribute to being retired from the military? Do you think people realistically who are in their 20s, 25 in the military, in the heat of it, would be able to have a similar discussion as all of us here? That's a good question. Ben, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
I'm kind of confused on the question. Are they asking, can retired folks have conversations like we're having?
From what I'm reading of it, it's like, do you think that people without the experience that we have, and being now later on in our lives, perhaps retired and able to be stable, do you think that that's the requirement to have these types of conversations? Or do you think that people in the trenches could be having these conversations?
No, I think for sure people in the trenches can have these conversations. It takes individuals like us to bring that conversation to them. I think that's the important piece. I think we've developed at least in the States, in the West for sure, we've developed, from my line of work, I got to talk from my perspective, we've developed a culture that has pushed these things on the peripheral until a lot of people, it gets too late, and then they have to have these conversations. They have to start exploring these spaces, which also could be part of just the process of like we talked about, the pain and the struggle and the conflict. But I do see that that's where the wisdom comes in. Like Sean was talking about, we've lived some life, and we have these new platforms now, like what we're doing here, to bring these conversations to people that are in it, that at least plant that seed for that new growth of a thought and idea to take place.
I love that. Travis, what are you thinking? Oh yeah, you got to unmute your mic though.
Dang it. Sorry about that. I think they can definitely take place in the team room. I think they do take place in the team room, maybe in not the same context, but being vulnerable enough to hear from your comrades that you made a mistake, is where it starts, and that getting back to like the difference between ego, understanding of your conscious self, and egotistical and being kind of like unwilling to accept fault is kind of the recognition. It does take some tenure and some wisdom and some of those hard-learned lessons that sting a little bit to achieve the place where you can just accept reality, and that was totally my fault. Yep. Totally messed that up. Yeah, that was me the whole time, messing up.
It was me the whole time.
And it does take a little bit of, I think, tenure to really have these, but I think us having these conversations and the next generation seeing these conversations take place, I think the thoughts are taking place in their own minds. I know they were in mine. I always had doubt, when I was young and, getting after it really hard and heavy, and my ego was 100 times my size. The thoughts were there. Would I ever let them out of my mouth? No, not at that moment. There was no way that was my fault. Are you crazy? No way, dude. I totally killed it like that, but, through some life lessons and learning and stuff, I think it's easy for me to at this point to just see my own faults and like take responsibility for them, and hopefully the next generation of up and comers can learn from my mistakes, and I hope that it helps them. If it gets one team guy to ask his bro a question that he wasn't going to ask, then I'm a success. And I hope that these conversations don't make you a weak man. They don't make you lesser of a soldier or a firefighter or a police officer or a father or any of that stuff. When you can talk amongst your peers about your concerns and how to better yourself and how to do better for your community, that you reap the benefits of what you do for the community. You yourself reap the benefits on the positive influence that you have on humanity. You don't even need the credit. As long as you do the work, you still reap the benefits.
Yeah. As does that next generation, right? That's that step that I think we forget sometimes, is that we put all this work in, and we may never see the benefits, but that's not the point. The point is that the benefits are coming, and that they're built upon each layer, which is fantastic. Sean, you got any thoughts?
Well, you may never see the outcomes or the benefits of your efforts put into that next generation of up-and-comers. But at the very least, there's going to be results because of your efforts. I mean, intellectually, that by trying to do better for those up-and-comers, they will become better, though you may not ever see it tangibly. You're in the game with them, and that's enough, just on that aspect alone, to want to engage to make the world a better place. If you're trying to make it better, it's actually becoming better. And so it doesn't need like fireworks and F-16s flying in the background as this grand moment of celebration to recognize that you did good in the world. If you're a positive person trying to do your best every second, you're doing good in the world. Congratulations. But there's no budget for fireworks every time you do good. So just accept the fact that your ripple effect, your positive goodness in the world is making us all better. There's nothing more than that. And so when it comes to the young troops out there, when I was in my 20s, like no one talked like this. Literally no one. And so do I wish that someone would have? Frickin' yes, I do. And that's why we're doing it. That's why we're here. That's why, as Travis said, and the first time he came on the podcast, I don't remember specifically in the podcast when he said it, but he used a word tenure that I'd never heard said before in the way that he delivered it. And it planted it in my brain, this idea of tenure. Tenure is a thing that is not achieved, but is gathered over time. And so more often than not, you never know like how much tenure you need in order to create a positive outcome immediately in front of you. But the fact remains, the more you've got, the better you can do it if you're thoughtful. And so in my 20s, I couldn't deliver much in respect to wisdom. Now in my 60s, I try to deliver as much as I can based on the limited amount of information that I have, but more importantly, the wisdom that I've accepted from others. And so my own wisdom that I try to put out to the world is rarely just Sean's. It's mostly a conglomeration of frickin' Travis the first time he showed up and put tenure into my brain, and etc. So this journey that we're all on, irrespective of how grounded I was at 20, I knew this much to be true. I just got to look for the good dudes out there, start figuring out how they're like so good at what they do and how come they're the man and why do I want to emulate them? That's all I had to do at that age, was figure out who's who in the zoo and start pursuing who's best in the zoo to see how I can flourish in this environment. And along the way, through my 20s and 30s and 40s, I got to figure a few things out that gave me a bit of tenure. But all of that stuff that I learned wasn't like Sean's unique stuff. It was the dudes that I surrounded myself by. I put myself in a trajectory that was a trajectory of excellence, not my own excellence, but the vessel that I was traveling in was called Team Excellent. And so irrespective of where I was in my military career, my first career being the military taught me how to do life better by learning from dudes who were doing it frickin' awesome. But we never talked about that. And I wish we would have, because it took me decades to understand what was going on when I was young. And if I'd have known it back then, I'd be better able to communicate it now. My life would have not been more successful, but would have been more impactful. And so it's a great question, and it deserves a much longer conversation on the subject, I feel.
Yeah, we could literally talk for the next 4 or 5 hours on that alone. And the thing that it made me think of is there's a quote that I like to use, which is, when is the best time to plant a tree? Well, 25 years ago. Right? When is the second best time to plant a tree? Right now. And just the conversation made me think about this just in a different light, in that 25 years ago doesn't exist right now. Right now exists right now. And so the best time to plant a tree is right now. It has nothing to do with the past. And the best thing we can do is take the information we have right now and plant that tree. Whether we see the benefits of it or not doesn't really matter. It's about setting the groundwork for later on in our life. And I think this is beautiful. And I don't want to hold you guys too long, so I just want to say thank you, Ben and Travis and Sean. This is a fantastic conversation. This is just awesome. I love having these. Can't wait to talk again more on this subject. And I got a few things down here, so we're going to have some more episodes come out of this one directly. And as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see you all next week.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see you all next time.